Hi, today we're going to look into HTML events inside of Wized. And Wized likes to call them element actions on event. So if you're going to look into making your Webflow web application interactive, and you heard about Wized, and you want to do things like I click on this button and something happens, or I send data to some place, this video is right for you. We're going to start from scratch, step by step, perfect for beginners, and after this, you will know how to do things on click, on form submit, and even how to implement drag and drop inside of your web application that you are going to build inside of this wonderful tool called Wized. So let's get right started. And, let's start with click. This is super simple. And we're going to use confetti to show how it works on the back end, which, you're not going to use confetti. You're sending that data somewhere. On click, you're probably going to perform a request or setting a variable or calling an API or something like this. But I think a good way to showcase how Wized is working on the back end is actually having something a little bit more visual to you watching this video, because it's hard to show, oh, by the way, look at this variable, it's changing when I click on here. I wanted to make it a little bit more visual, where you actually see right in the middle of your screen, I click on it and something is happening. This is what Wized is doing, right? I'm clicking a lot of times right now. So let me know how you like this visual approach. I think it is a good way to learn how Wized works and how you can use Wized and their HTML events to make your web application interactive. So let's get right started with it. So right now, before we start in the Wized part, let's start with the Webflow part. The Webflow part happens is I just have a div block that will be my button. And I have a Wized attribute. So in the settings panel here of that div block, in the custom attribute section, I'm adding an attribute called Wized. This is how I let Wized know that, I want you to look into this button. So we have to call it Wized, and then the value will be how I want to name this attribute in Wized, which is button item. So when I go to Wized in X-ray mode, you will see that, we have the button item in here. This is how we named that using the attribute. This is how we do the link between Webflow and Wized. So now in here, let's actually just copy the confetti function, because I cannot write that out of the top of my head. And let's start actually from scratch here. So I want to go to X-ray mode and click on the button item, right? And now you see this is already applied to the attribute I clicked on, to this one, and we have an element-based action. And this video is only about element-based actions for the on events, but there will be more videos coming for all the other stuff that you can do in Wized. So let's go to the action part here, and we can go to the setting. Inside of here, we will find the on event. We're only going to work with on event because there is already quite a lot that you can do with it. So let's click on event, and in here, let's actually select click, right? And now I can set an action. And in action, I can perform a request, I can set a cookie, I can set a variable, I can do all of those cool things on click. But most of them are hard for you as the viewer of this video, are hard for you to see. You have to go very close to the screen and see, oh, did that variable change? So we're going to use a run function in here, and we're going to run some JavaScript to have this confetti. You will not need that, but we're going to make that so that you can see, oh, yes, when I click on here, this code is running that is visually showing me that I clicked on here. It is easier for you as the viewer to watch that something is happening than me saying, oh, let's zoom in, this variable updated all the way very small in the top of the screen. So you don't need to write JavaScript in there. This is just a little bit to make it more visual for you watching the video, that you see, oh, I click on it. Oh, and that code is running. Okay, and I click again, and it is running again. Beautiful. So this is how we're going to do that. And with doing that, we already checked the first mouse event, which is click. Cool. So we have the click event, user clicks an element. When I click, I'm going to perform this, and we're going to use this in the on event setting in Wized, and this is the event for click. Now we're going to keep this setting as it is throughout all the other ones, and we're just only needing to change the event because this is where Wized is adding the event listener on. So there is another one called double click, which is pretty cool. Sometimes you want some things to be a little bit more secretive. You know, sometimes the user clicks those things by mistake, and you want the user to double click it. Right now, I'm clicking one time, nothing happens. And I'm clicking one time, and again, nothing happens. But if I do double click very fast behind each other, I'm going to get confetti. So this is what the double click event is helping you with. We also have mouse over, and this is an interesting one. You will see why. If I add the mouse over, and this will always only target this element, right? I can go mouse over here, nothing will happen. But the moment the mouse is over here, you see the moment the mouse is moving, we're going to send a lot of confetti. And this is why we have confetti. The moment the mouse is not moving, nothing is happening. But the moment the mouse is moving in the mouse over, we're going to send, like for every inch, basically, we're going to update. For every pixel, basically, we're moving, we're updating its state all the time, and we're going to do this action a lot of times. So this is probably not a good thing to submit forms, because you're going to end up having 100,000 form submissions from one user. So you want to be careful with mouse move, right? Because the mouse move will, the moment the mouse moves over this item, you're going to reset and, do the thing that is attached to it. So you want to be very careful with that one. But then we also have the mouse over. That is a better alternative to mouse move. So if we go to the button and change this to mouse over, we see we're only going to send the confetti the moment the mouse is over it. It can be moving as much as it wants, nothing is happening. The moment I leave it and go back, we're going to send confetti or perform your request or whatever you want to attach to it. You can, do all of those things. So this is mouse over. Now let's go to mouse out, which is also a pretty cool one. So let's go to mouse out, just like that. And now we see the moment the mouse enters, nothing is happening. The moment the mouse leaves or is out of the box, we're going to send the confetti. Mouse goes in, nothing happens. Mouse goes out, we have the confetti. So then, very similar to we have mouse out, and then we have mouse enter. Now, mouse enter is pretty much the same as mouse over, but it is targeting the process where it enters. Sometimes timing is everything in web development, and mouse enter can help you with that, because mouse enter sends it the moment the mouse is entering, right? Like the moment the inch, like the first milli-inch, like the little bit, the first pixel that hits this target, we're going to send this. So, this is, be careful with that, because if you tie any request to that, like sometimes the user just hits the coin a little bit and you're going to send data somewhere. So I think confetti is really a good way of showing those things, to be honest. So those are the mouse events. There are more mouse events, but and you can find them here in this link that I linked you in. But, you don't need to know all of them. You only need to know the relevant ones. And I think that the only one that you're ever going to need is click for buttons, because, this is you click on it and it performs some sort of request or sets some sort of variable or navigates somewhere, right? This is the most used one, and this is the one that your user knows and can predict, I click on this button, something happens. So but we don't want to dive in too much into UX in this video here because I could talk about this for hours. But yeah, you click on it and something happens. This is the most used one, and it is called click. Beautiful. So then let's do drag and drop after this one. We also have cut, copy, and paste. And this is super exciting. because you can prevent users from copying text on your web application or your blog if you don't want them using prevent default. Or you can show confetti. So let's do both. So we have this heading here, and we don't want people to copy this heading. So first of all, I need to add a Wized attribute of Wized on here, and we call this heading element, just like that. So now let's add another action for this heading. And let's go on event, and let's start with copy, right? So on copy, I can prevent default in this example and run the function, and let's just borrow the confetti from here. Okay, beautiful. So, and let's paste this in here so I have a visual way of showing you what's happening. So the moment the user, let's say, wants to copy this heading, I'm going to get confetti. So the moment I click on copy, I'm going to get confetti. But I cannot paste it, right? Because the code I pasted initially is still on there, right? I copy this, and it's not being, nothing is happening, right? So why is that? Because I have prevent default on. Prevent default is preventing the browser default, which would be on copy. You're going to copy the text that the user tried to select. If I remove the prevent default, just like that, now when I copy this, we're going to send the request, but I can paste the word that I copied in here. As you can see, HTML, HTML. If I prevent default on this, it is preventing me the default that is actually doing the, what the browser expects to happen is copying that. Now when I copy that, it is not copying the new one, it is still falling back to the old thing I just copied before prevent default was on. And now if I disable prevent default on the copy event, and I copy the whole text, just like that, and I can now paste it because now the text actually was copied. So prevent default can also preventing people from copy the text, and you can use Wized to do that as well if you want to add a little bit extra protection, or you want to just mess around with your users a little bit. So this is copy. This is pretty cool. Cut is probably better explained on an input field. So let's go with cut here. Cut is another cool action. I don't have cut available to me. So cut would be where I have text in here and I can cut it out. So let's apply cut to this input field. Let's go to this input field here, and let's go on event, cut, and let's do the run function, and let's get my confetti. So let's copy the confetti here, and let's, do this on cut. So now the moment, let's type some random stuff in here, and the moment I cut this out, we're going to send confetti. But what if I don't want users to cut this out? I can just simply prevent default on cut, and now on cut it will still show the confetti, but it will not let me cut this out of the element because we are preventing default. Preventing default is preventing the browser system default. The browser knows if you want to cut this out, I'm going to cut it out. And if Wized is saying no, prevent default, it is telling the browser don't do what you know. So if I cut this out, the cut will not work. We're still registering the event, but it will not actually perform the action of cutting it out. I need to prevent default, and then on cut, I will be able to cut it out, and I will be able, to perform the request associated with it. So this is cut. So that's pretty cool. And then we have paste. So now I cutted this out, and I want to paste it in this input field. So let's change this in the input field here to paste. So the moment I paste text in here, as you can see, we're going to perform a request, right? So I paste it in here, it's going to perform something. Now we can also prevent default if we don't want users to paste text in here. I can also now paste it in here. It will not let me paste because we're preventing the browser default, and then there is something getting triggered. Maybe it could be something like when you disable default, and the user tries to paste it in here, you can, trigger this to show a pop-up saying, no, you cannot paste your credit card number in here. Please type it by hand because we want to make sure that everything is right, or something like this. You can go crazy. But again, if you add prevent default, the browser default for paste will not work, and the user will not be able to paste the element, but you're still logging that the user tried to paste the element. Now, if you remove prevent default, the user is allowed to paste it, and you're going to log that it was pasted. Pretty cool stuff. So this is it for the inputs. Let's remove this. So we have cut, copy, and paste. Beautiful. So now let's do drag and drop at the end, because that is probably one of the most complicated ones. So what we want to do is, and mobile touch, we'll do drag and drop and mobile touch at the end. This is the complicated row here. Let's go with forms and inputs. This is also something that you're going to find that you need to use a lot in Wized. So we have this form element here, and let me show you how to do that. So I have my form element in here, right? And I'm going to add on the form element a Wized attribute of form item, as you can see right here. So now this will be giving this form, and it needs to be applied not on the form block, it needs to be applied on the form directly, right? And then you don't care about the items inside of the form. On the form block, we will need, and not on the form itself, on the form, we need to add the Wized attribute, and then we can name it however we want. Just don't add any spaces. It needs to be all one word. It can have minuses or underscores to separate them, or you can use camel case. So now we see we have the form in here, and now I can add an on event, and let's start with submit. This is the one that we need for forms, and we want to prevent default, very important. And now we don't need to reset, or actually let's just start with all of those things and then reset the form. And I want to do the confetti so that you can see it. So let's add the confetti. And then I also want to set a variable. So let's take, let's create a variable. Let's call this form. And I want to get the form data in here. So we don't need that. You go to the data store in here, plus, and then you add a variable. Let's call this form. And then we will be able to update the variable from the run function as well. So let's go to the run function, and let's take our variable under we showed the confetti, and we're going to have this equal the form data, just like that. Now it's empty, but that will do it. So now let's also go to our form data. We will see that form data is empty, and let's reload this. Now form data is empty, and the moment I start typing in Wized dev, and let's do hey at wizddev.com. And now, the moment I submit this, we will get the confetti, and you will see the variable containing the data that was on submit will be then logged to our variable, which is pretty cool. I don't need to apply any action on the button. I only need to apply it on the form. Now, the benefit of that is, the cool thing about that is we are fully accessible. So when I type in Wized, let's only do Wized this time, Wized, and let's do hey at wizddev.com, and I click on enter, it will submit the form, because the native form behavior in your browser is if you type something in on a form, it is accessible. So if you click enter or return on Apple, you're going to submit the form without having to click the submit button. So this is also cool because it is fully accessible. So as you can see, we just got that logged to our variable. And now let's play around with the settings a little bit. We have the reset form. If I don't want the form to reset after it successfully was submitted, I can just, disable reset. And let's do wized at email.com. Now I submit this form. It will be submitted. The new thing will be logged to the variable, but we will not reset the thing that was inputted in the form, right? So let's go back to the form. Now, you always need to prevent default. if you don't want them to go to your email and just being sent as a normal Webflow form. 99% of all cases you need prevent default. If I'm not going to prevent default on this form, it is actually submitting the form, and I will be receiving an email that the form was submitted, which we don't want because we want to send that data to a different place and then use Wized. As you can see, just got the email. But we want to prevent default, so that will not happen. Otherwise, it will not successfully trigger any requests. So let's put fake email in here. Let's do Wized at 123, and that is not a real email, right? And when I submit it, it will still submit it because we're, preventing default. Now, if I were to not prevent default, oh, actually, it will still send that. Okay, interesting. Because I probably put it in as a text field and not as an email field. So ignore that. But yeah, I just got the email. But yeah, you have that in here. I can type random stuff. And with prevent default, it will submit it. Okay, now it says something is wrong. Okay, perfect. Now it was working. Let's refresh. Okay, it should work now. When I add gibberish in here, it will still show the default behavior, even though we prevent default, if you use a form element, right? An email element. The way you can get around this ugly bar is changing this to a text field and then adding some, custom functions in Wized that will then show, oh no, this is not an email. And then you can style this and you can make it look prettier if you want to. But, this is beyond this topic of this video. But, if I were to not prevent default and then I would add an at in here, and it will be an email, it will submit it, which we don't want. So we need to prevent default when we do a form submission, just like that, prevent default, and it will not send this as an email. And let's add an at in here. As you can see, it will send this, it will log this new to my variable because we have that specified in the function. And yeah, you will see that on submit, we're going to submit the form using the submit action, which is pretty cool. And now with the reset form, when I submit it, it will also reset the data after it was successfully submitted, but it's not submitting it to Webflow, and therefore I'm not getting all my emails every time a user clicks a button on my web application. Very important, you're going to get a lot of emails, and Webflow wants to upgrade you because those emails cost money. But you don't need to pay that if you use Wized. Pretty cool. So we have the submit event. Now let's talk more about the components that we can use. So let's stop talking about forms here. Let's start talking about inputs in forms. So we have submit. We also have change. Change is for any items that you can have in a form. Any items like the email item that can contain data are subjected to change. Also checkboxes and radio buttons. In this example, let's go with the input field. And let's go with change. So I have my input field here. We're not targeting the form. We are looking into only this input field. This is where we are right now. So we have our input field and we have on change. So the moment I type, let's go to this and type something in, and I go out of this input field. So while I'm typing, nothing is happening, right? So I can type in hello world. This is how every programmer starts. And I go out of this field and the field is changing. This is when we are triggering the event, right? And I remove this and go out of it. And this is when it gets triggered again. Now, if you want this to happen every time the user inputs something, you can change the input. You can change the change to input. Now, every character that gets added, everything that gets removed, we're going to send, we're going to perform this event. So when I type hello world, you can see we get the confetti going. Because every time something changes, we're updating it. Now, input is very interesting if you want to have this tied to a variable, because the data is being transferred in real time rather than if the user clicks out of the field. So what we can do is, let's create a variable going to the data store. Let's click on plus and let's call this my input, just like that. And now I can go on input field, and we still have the confetti, but let's go to a new line here. Let's select my variable, space, equal. So we will be using the equal operator, the equal sign. We're going to update what is in v.input. And we want this to be, we have our input field here saying hello world. We click on there. And now if we refresh the canvas, you will see that this variable will update the moment I start typing. I click, I have the variable now fully in sync with my input field. So I have H, E, L, L, O. So as you can see, as I'm typing here, it is updating the variable in real time. So this is how I sync that. So input can be very helpful if you're going to do something like, oh, you have a weak password, and as you type that password score gets improved, saying, it's a little bit stronger. Okay, now it's good. You added like 50 ads in there. That is how we like our passwords, right? So this is cool for real-time validation of user input. On change is after the user finished typing the input. So, those are, the most common ones for inputs. So we have on submit, on change, and I actually forgot to add input in here. Sorry. I need to update my documentation to include input because that is important. So let's actually do this right now. Let's go to change. Let's add input in here because input when the user inputs text. Boom. Let's publish that. Documentation is back up. Boom. Now we have on input. Very important. So we had on change, we had on input, we had on submit. Now focus. Focus is also cool. That happens when you click on it. So we're still at this item in here, as you can see. And now I can do focus. And let's remove, because we're not typing anything on focus. So now, the moment I focus on this element, we're going to send the event. So the moment I click in this, we're registering that the user focused on this element. This can also happen within a form, for example, if you are using like accessibility, excessive fields in there. But this is probably not, something nice. When you click in this, you can have like a pop-up come up or something like this, or some help or some panel on the side suggesting inputs. So this is cool for on focus. Is when the user focus on it, you may be able to have like a side panel slide up and say, here are our input suggestions or something like this. Pretty useful. So we have on focus and we also have on blur. This is the opposite of focus. So on blur means I go out of this input field. It's a bit like on change, but it doesn't require the user to type anything. So I can go in here and I can go out, and I don't need to update the content within the text field, but I'm still sending that action. So let's say I click on here, that pop-up opens, and I click out of it. Now, when I click out of it, I need to register that the user clicked out of it to remove the pop-up, right? Or the slide up or whatever. So this is also pretty useful for UX. And this is what the blur does. It's I click on here and I click out of it, and then I'm registering that the user clicked out of it. Very useful. So now we're off. We did the mouse events. We did the cut, copy, paste. We did the forms and inputs, the most important ones. Let's go with drag and drop. And drag and drop is not native to your browser. I need to mention that. Your browser is completely confused when you try to do drag and drop. It is not something that a computer was ever built to do. But Wized did a great job in allowing you to hack around with it, to mess around with it, to make drag and drop work in their technology. And I'm thankful that Wized put their resources into making drag and drop super easy within their platform. So at the end of this video, and I'm not going to go into mobile touch today because it is only recommended for Despia users anyway. If you're going to use Despia, which is the tool I built, a little advertising here, but it is the tool I built to turn your Wized application into a mobile application and to publish it on the App Store and the Google Play Store and to add native features like Face ID and all of that. And you are able, out of the box in Wized, Wized supports the native behaviors that Despia is introducing to your web application. And the specific behaviors that Wized is allowing you to do is touch move and touch end and touch cancel. So you'll be able to register events when, you know, the user touches across the screen and does stuff like that. You can, for example, use this to draw with their finger on touch. So you can do pretty cool stuff with that. But I'll be making a separate video just about, you know, how wonderful Wized supports the capabilities that Despia is introducing in there to build native applications with it. And thanks to the Wized team to, you know, supporting those HTML features and having them inclusive. And it doesn't just only work for Despia. It also works if you have the mobile version of your site in the browser, but it will not work as good because it is not a native app. It is in your browser and it may interfere with the different things that the browser wants you to do. You know, browsers are always different than native mobile apps. But that was enough talking about that. Let's go back to Wized. So we have now the drag and drop. And there are quite a few things, so let's start with dragging and dropping. So first of all, I need to mention I got this item draggable. Now, second of all, I need to show you how I got this draggable. So let's go to Webflow, and we need to go to this item that we want to be able to drag around the screen, and we need to go to Settings, Custom Attributes, and I need to add an attribute with the name of draggable and the value of true. I need to publish this, and then in Wized, I will be able to drag this around the screen. Now, nothing is happening. We don't see any confetti because this is still linked on the click. So I need to go back to this element, and I need to change the click to something that is a drag event. So let's go with drag start. So the moment we start dragging this element, so we go with drag start, the moment I start dragging this element, we're going to get confetti. So you can see the moment, like the moment I drag it like a little inch out of there, it's going to start recognizing that and triggering the event that is attached to it. So that is pretty cool. So now we have another event. We have drag, and drag is not really recommended because it, at least if you don't need any real-time drag position information, because drag will do a lot of things. As you can see on the confetti with drag, we're going to get quite some confetti. And not even if I move it, just if I hold it. If it is dragged, it's going to, like every time it is dragged, it's going to re-trigger this request. That is probably not something that you're going to use a lot of times, but I just want to point out that probably you don't want to use drag. And then we have drag enter, which actually applies to the different element where I'm dragging the item in. So I have my drop zone here, which is just a different div block, and I need to add an on event, drag enter, and then I'm going to go to the action to run the function, and let's get our confetti. Let's take the confetti, and let's, you know, on drag enter, we want to show the confetti. And then for this item, let's remove the confetti from here, because otherwise that's too much confetti. And let's just remove this word here, so we're not looking for anything. So now when I drag, oh, it's still working. So let's just comment this out. So // now it's doing nothing. So it's still doing something. What's going on? Let's just remove this. Okay. Let's just refresh the canvas. Okay, now we're good. So I drag this out of here now, and keep in mind, we have the drop zone, and this is looking for drag enter and then doing the confetti if any draggable item enters this field. And as you can see, the moment it enters the field, we're going to get a little confetti. The moment it gets out, nothing happens. The moment it gets back in, it enters the field, we're going to get some confetti. Boom, that is it. And now let's go with the next event. So we have drag start, drag, and drag enter. Let's go with drag over. Again, or expect confetti. A little bit. So the drag over is the moment I have this item here and it drags over here. The moment for the time being it's dragged over, we're going to get confetti. Similar to drag, but limited with the zone. If I have drag, if it's anywhere on the page, we're going to get a lot of confetti. If it is dragged over, it only applies if it is dragged over this specific item that the event is applied on. And I'm going to get a lot of confetti here. Ooh, that looks cool. So we have that. That is the drag over. Now we have drag leave. This is when I drag the item over it and then leave. This is triggering on the leave. So we have drag leave, and I'm going to drag this over here. Nothing is happening. I'm leaving. It is triggering this leave event. I'm dragging over again. I didn't drag that good. So I'm dragging over it again. Nothing is happening. I'm dragging away, and it is registering that we left. And then I have drop. Drop will not work right now. So let's skip the drop one, and I'm going to show you how drop works because that requires a little bit more setup. And we have drag end. So let's go back to this item, and let's go on event, drag end, and let's steal the confetti again. Boom. So we have the drag end, and let's run the function with the confetti to show you how that works. So drag end means I move this and I stop anywhere, and the moment it stopped, I'm registering that this stopped, and I'm going to send the confetti. So nothing is happening here. I can move this how I want. I let go, and the moment it snaps back to its original position, the drag stops or was snapped into something else. We're registering that. It is not drop, because drop means only if it was successfully dropped in the drop zone. But this is now not successful, so it snaps back. So here we go. So now let's clear the actions that we have on this item here. And, we still have that one. And let's go to the drop zone. And, let's make sure we copy our confetti. And let's start with drop. Let's introduce drag and drop, meaning I take this item, move it in here, it snaps in place, and we're going to, register the drop event. So in order to do that, I need to go to the drop zone, and I need to add on event drop. And now on drop, we want to run the function for our confetti, for example. Now, the tricky thing is, if I take this and drop over, it is not dropping. It is not dropping, and we see, because there's no confetti, it is not successfully dropping. It is snapping back into its original position. Why is that? Because we need to prevent default. Now, on drop, we need to prevent default too, but that will not solve it alone, right? Because it's still snapping back. So on drag over, we need to prevent default as well. So I need to add another on event inside of my drop zone, and I do drag over. And on drag over, I need to prevent default. And because it is archived, as you can see here, I'm just going to write return 0, because Wized by default is not making your actions active unless you type anything in at least a run function. So now I drag this over and it snaps in place. As you can see, now if I move it here, it falls back. As you can see, this is how it looks if it falls back. But if I now go over the drop zone and let go, it snaps in place, and now we are successfully registering the drop event because we are preventing default. If we if we would not prevent default, as you can see here, and I drop it over, we are not getting any confetti and it's moving back into its original positioning. But the moment on the drop zone, I have drop prevent default, and drop prevent default as well will not do the job alone because it still snaps back. But I need to add another on event action for drag over, and the moment immediately the draggable item is over the drop zone, I need to prevent the default of the drop zone so it snaps in place and then allows the drop and will not have it move back. So now, if I remove X-ray and drop it over here, it will snap in place. We're registering that, and now we are going to get our confetti. And this is how you can make drag and drop work. And this is not really a practical example because drag and drop normally is transferring of data. So let me show you how we can have this item dragged in this input field and then transfer the text that is in here to be typed in this input field. This is also a pretty it's pretty cool stuff. It's a pretty cool use case. So and this is pretty cool. I did not know if you know this. You can move this setting that you have in here just simply to a different attribute. So let's move this from the drop zone to the input field. And now the drop zone will not be the drop zone anymore, but the input field will be the drop zone. Isn't that cool? So I can just simply change the attribute it is targeted on or add another attribute and it will do the magic. So now it doesn't work here anymore. This doesn't have any action applied to it because we removed this action which is not tied to the element to be now tied to a different element, and all the configuration has been moved over. Oh, wrong thing. We have now two actions on that element. So this is the drop one. So we have the drop action for the drop zone, and when I drop it in there, we're going to get confetti. It is being registered. So now what we want to do is we want to also target the data that we're getting. So I want to go to my variables, and I want to go to the plus. And let's call this drag data. So we're registering the data for the drag item. So we have my drag data variable right here added. And now I go to the button item in here. Oh, did I remove something for the button item? Interesting. For some reason it got removed. Okay, did I just do that? Okay, no. I guess I have to redo that. So let's go to on event, drag. And I like to use drag for this one. I would like to fire it all the time. So let's do, or actually no, I don't like to fire it all the time. Let's do drag start. Okay, perfect. And then let's do set variable. Let's take the drag data and let's return item, just like that. Oh, I like the other quotes. Boom. So now we have the item. So now, as you can see, I have my drag data, and now the moment I drag it, I change the drag data to item. Let's do this again. So the moment I drag this item, the drag data is updating to be item. Just like that. So this is beautiful. But now when I stop dragging, it's not setting it back. So before we do that, let's set this back. Let's add another, inside of this item here that we drag, let's add another sub action. Let's go on event, drag end, and I don't need to prevent default on those ones. Let's do set variable. Let's take our drag data, return, and let's add empty quotes in here, an empty string, so we're going to reset it. Now, let's refresh. If I'm going to start dragging this item, you will see that this drag data is updating to item. The moment I let go, it is clearing itself, which is pretty cool. And you can also make this work dynamically with rendered lists. So now when I snap this in place here, the data is not being transferred yet. So on this input field, I need to add, oh, wrong, because I have two on those input fields. On this drop zone, let's go to my drop event and let's remove this confetti for now. Let's change this to set variable. So on drop, so the moment I successfully drop it in and the drop was successful, I want to Actually, I need to do a run function because I want to set the input value. So let's get our confetti back, and let's keep this as a run function, and let's do something cool. As you can see, if I type hello in here, right? And I go to my run function here that is on drop. So the moment I drop that element in here, so this event and it snaps in place, this is the drop. Under the run function for the confetti, I can just simply look into my input field, which I know says hello. So I'm looking into the input field that says hello, which is this one, and I'm going to have this equal my drag data. So this is how I transfer the data from the element to the input field, for example. So the moment I move this over, and let's see if that works, it should be setting the value of the input field. Maybe I need to remove the double action. Maybe that is interfering with it. Okay. Let's look back at that. What did just happen? So we have the drop event, and I think maybe having two actions on it maybe confuse something. Let's go a step back real quick. Let's reload, and yeah, now it works. Boom, we're snapping in place. And let's just start testing in iterations. On drop, let's just start taking this input field and having it equal hello, right? So let's see if we can get this working statically. In Wized, a wonderful thing, especially if you're developing, try to get it working statically before you go with dynamic. Now you can see it is working. So the moment I move this over and it snaps into place, we're going to set the input of this field to hello. Now we want to make it work dynamically with our variable. So since we got it working statically, we can make it work dynamically. Let's take drag data. So now, if I move this over, I'm going to update it to item. Boom. So this is how we do data transfer as well using the events if you want to use drag and drop. I have my item in here, and the moment I drag this item, the drag data variable is being set to item, and this is where we get this from. And then when I drop it over here, on the drop event, make sure you prevent default on drag over. But on the drop event, I'm going to look into the variable that I know will contain the data of the item being dragged. And then I'm going to have the input using the little run function that we did with the equal. I'm going to set the input using this little run function of the item that is in the variable as it was successfully dropped over. So now it is empty on drop. This should be set to input. Just like that, this will be set to input. Okay, so now I have this over here. I drag this over, and this will be input. Now I think that we are maybe having a timing issue where, the drop stops too fast, and where we clear this. So we have drag end. Maybe, let's see, do we have something else where we can drag over, drag enter, drag start, drag end? Interesting. So we may have a little timing issue here because we are resetting it. We could do something else too. So right now, as you can see, it only works sometimes. When I drag this over, it is setting it. But sometimes if I'm a bit slower, it may not be setting it, but if I'm fast, it's setting it. What we can do is we cannot have this variable cleared based on the item that is being dragged. So I have this item here, and when this stops, we're going to clear it. But maybe I'm thinking, why don't we have it cleared when it was successfully dropped in here in the text was set? That is a more secure way of handling drag and drop. So let's go to the custom button here. Let's remove this clearing action. So we only, let's go back on here, when we drag this item, boom. So when we drag this item, we're setting it. When we release it, it is still on here. And then when it was successfully snapped in place here, we want to clear this one. And I think that is maybe a better way. So let's go to the input, and on drop, we want to not just set this element, but also clear it. Now, I could add another action block in here, but I think that would be a little bit too much effort. I'm just going to do this with code. So I'm going to go to my run function. I'm going to go to drag item, and I'm going to write equals quotes. So now when I run this, this will clear it out. This is the thing that you would otherwise do visually. But, you know, this is so little code that I'm okay doing this with code a little bit. So let's clear this. And now it is working all the time, and it should be clearing it. So now I drag this over. We're getting the item. I put it on here, and it's setting it. And after it was successfully set, it's clearing the drag data. And I can be slow. I can be like, just gradually going over here. Let's clear this. Gradually going over. And it's still snapping in place because we don't have that timing issue. Because when you work with actions and HTML events, sometimes timing is everything. This is why you have different variations for moving the mouse over a thing, because timing is everything. A millisecond can make a difference. So this is why we also want to think a little bit logically. Okay, we have those. We drag this item here, and actually when it moves back, we want it to stop on moving back, but maybe it is more secure if this was set, and then after this was set, we're just clearing this one based on the different item it was dropped over. It was dropped on. Again, drag and drop is not something for beginners, but I wanted to include it so that this video has the full logical completeness of Wized, and that you at least know that this is something that exists. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you now know everything about HTML events. We didn't talk about all the HTML events that are available to you. I'm going to put the link and the clonable for this little experiment in the video description, and if you click on here, you're going to go to a website that will tell you all the available HTML events. And actually, let's go on this website really quick again. HTML events. Now, one thing I want you to know is they're going to say on store, on blur. You need to remove the on. If you type those in Wized, you cannot write on. You just need to type blur, change, input, not on change, on input, on this. You always need to remove the on because Wized is doing that for you automatically, and you don't want to have on input, right? So you need to, make this a little bit work with what they are offering you. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you now know how to make your web application interactive thanks to Wized, and even do drag and drop if you want to. This is always fun. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all your support, for all your time. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I hope that this really helped you. And this is, getting you on the path of building web applications in Wized. I really appreciate all your support, all your wonderful comments, all your wonderful emails and messages on Discord. I really appreciate you all, and thank you so much for watching my videos. I hope that you're going to learn a lot from them, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.